That's beautiful.
All right. Hello, I am Eric, and this is Marty. Our first installment, we discussed what we were going to talk about on our podcast, but we did not really do much in the way of introducing ourselves. So, Eric Goth, a retired Janesville police detective. I started in the career of law enforcement in 1991. I decided that, I thought maybe we would talk about like what compelled us to get into the line of work in the first place, because I do want to talk about like if anybody's even going to continue to work in the field.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
So it was January of 1990. It was a blustery day. The wind, the snow. I was delivering furniture for a local furniture company. And trying to decide, 21 years old, trying to decide what I'm going to do with my life, because furniture delivery was not it. So, driving up Harding Street, a Janesville police car goes by me, and the wheels, that's just it. It just started turning. I hadn't thought of it before that. I'd run through a bunch of different ideas, and so I thought, I could probably do that. I could probably do that job. And then I thought, like, doing all the logistics on it, like, I don't really know very much about it. I did know some police officers, not very well, but I sort of have an idea that they seem like all right guys. I had in the back of my mind this meathead, not very smart, just that stereotype that was lingering back there. I'm like, I don't think I would blend very well with that, I think that probably still exists a little bit today. But so I had the stereotypes. But back in 1990, all you had to have was a high school diploma and a driver's license, and that was it. So I applied for my first job in March of that year. Applied for Edgerton Police Department. They had one position open. I went to the testing. There's 300 people in the cafeteria of the high school taking the test for this one job. So I took the wind out of my sails. I thought, well, this probably isn't going to work. And then I got an interview. And I was one of like 20 people that they interviewed. I was hopelessly underqualified for the job, because even then, most guys had some college, or they were ex-military, military police or whatever. But anyway, I got an interview, and that started me on the road. I got my first job offer was from the Rock County Sheriff's Department as a jailer. I was a corrections officer for the Sheriff's Department, starting in 1991. Hi, Julie. January 1991. So I worked in the jail. That was a culture shock. It was then that I realized how many people were in the world that just had serious disordered thinking, just really seriously disturbed people. Not everybody in the jail is like that, but that's where they're at. If you want to go looking for them, it is a target-rich environment, if that's what you want to find. Yeah. So, went to work in Verona Police Department, up by Madison. Then I went to work for Janesville. And, I discovered that police work is a magnet for misery. If there's something bad in your life, there's a good chance that you may decide you're going to call the police department about it. It's literally a bug light for sadness and depression and violence and anger and, mental disease. And, it's day after day, from little miseries to big miseries. That's just what the job was. And, you develop, some emotional resiliency from doing it every day. And So I was thinking like there was just, speaking of a little misery, there was a story, not a story that actually happened. Um, it was Friday night, I don't know, 1990s, whenever. I got a call because it was a husband-wife civil dispute, right? Ex-husband, ex-wife, civil dispute. They have a boy of about, let's say, 8, 9, 10. It's dark. It's 9 o'clock. Maybe it's later. Somewhere there. I was working second shift. So I get called to her house. He's there. The boy is standing with him, and he's there to pick up the boy. But he was supposed to be there at like 5 o'clock, and he is hours late, right? Dad picking up the boy. So mom's pissed, and she's like, she's not going to let him go. So by the time I get there, she has acquiesced and agreed. Yes, it is your weekend. The son can go with you, but he's not taking his football stuff, his football pads, helmets. He's got a game the next day. Next day, Saturday, he's got a game in the morning. So I get there. The boy's crying, because mom says he can't have his football stuff. He can't play football, and it's dad's fault. Right? She's got to get this in on dad, and dad's like, come on, just give him his stuff. And I showed up, and I'm immediately on dad's side, like, come on, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I thought my childhood was bad. Holy shit, Jesus Christ. So then it's every week. It's every week of this shit. This is Herbert. It's every week. He has to be here on time. This is no way to co-parent. He has to be here on time. Saying, I'm like, why am I here? Like, I can't. None of this is illegal. None of this is illegal. But that poor kid. Okay, he's got nothing to do with it. He's got nothing to do with any of this, right? He wants dad to be there on time just as much as mom wants dad to be there on time. But that's how mom gets dad.
So how old do you think you were when you were handling that complaint? In other words, how much life experience did you already have?
I was mid-20s. Yeah. Well, I had to be 25, maybe 24, 25.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course, both the parents are older than me. And here I am, doing my best to negotiate some sort of a peaceful settlement. She wasn't having it. It doesn't matter who I was. She was done with him. Yeah. And this was her, going nuclear and being like, all right, I'm going to use the kid to that's just, and then, you drive away from that, like, all right, well, drive away and I want to hear the end of the story. Does she come to her senses in the morning? Does she bring the kid his football stuff? You want to hope that that's what happened.
Sure.
Right. That's what you want to. Yeah. That's what you want to imagine happened.
Yeah.
But you.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. We just have intruders. But so from those things to infant deaths. So how many infant deaths? Like I was shocked at how frequent that was. 2 or 3 times. You're going to infant death, and every one of them was a punch in the gut. But then, as you continue to do it, you develop this callousness, maybe, or just the ability to stop looking at it as a dead baby and to look at it as evidence. What do I see here? Yes, what do I see here? What's rigor mortis? What's what's fluidity look like? What position was the baby? What's the crib look like? And you start to become much more analytical, and then there comes that point in time when you start to realize that these things actually appear to be having no effect on you. You go to an infant death in the morning, then you go to the baby's autopsy later the next day, you write a report, and then that night you don't think about it like you used to think about it for days afterwards. It's like, you develop this, like you put your hand on a hot stove and it doesn't hurt anymore. You're like, well, this is like a superpower. This is a superpower. Right. But that's not, being on fire
Well, it still
and not
hurts.
knowing it
You just don't
is
feel
not
it.
that's not a superpower.
Yeah.
That is a definitive weakness right there.
Because it still does damage. You just don't feel
right,
the
right.
damage
Yes,
at the time it's happening.
exactly. Yes, your skin is coming off of your hand.
Yeah.
But to you, it's like, oh,
Right.
you've somehow managed to insulate yourself from,
So when you talk about roughly 25, and not that life experiences throughout your entire life aren't important, but do we agree? Let's just, if we pick a number, are we comfortable with like 18 when you start to think like an adult? So you've got 7 years of adult thinking under your belt when you walk in.
We can say that.
And you try to solve a problem that's been festering between, in this case, two people in your football analogy. It's been festering. They've been unable to come to an adult decision on it. And depending on who your supervisor is that night, you've got from 15 to maybe 30 minutes to resolve that and get back on the road because you ain't staying. You're not staying there.
You're not staying there for that.
No. So it's an interesting assignment. 6 or 7 years, and you can argue that do you think as an adult at 18? Well, hopefully at least a percentage of the time you do, but for a whole lot you don't. But that's what you're using. Not that you're not using your whole life experience, because maybe you went through those circumstances, depending on your background. And an interesting aside, of course, as you're telling the story, is that when you applied for Janesville Police Department, I did your background investigation. So that's what we first met, which was another story for another day. So no, and then you go from, the incident that you thought was the worst thing you've ever seen, 3 months later has been bumped down to maybe the third or fourth thing. And eventually, as your career goes on, they all just meld into just a series of cesspool suck circumstances that we resolved by calming it down enough so we could leave and hope for the best after that. I mean, honestly, that's sort of how it comes down to.
That is the secret, isn't it? Is all right. Let's see if we can manage to not tear each other's throats out, and then we slowly back out, and hope that goes that way. All right. So that's my story. What do you have to say for yourself? Who do you think you are?
Well, it's parallel in some ways to yours, but still some significant difference. First of all, I was hired in 1978. I was living in the Chicago suburbs. Back then, the way that most hiring was done was through newspaper advertisements. So the local police department.
You answered a want ad?
Yes, hired all the way down, or put it in the Chicago Tribune. They spelled the name wrong, and it said Jamesville with an M. And I'd never been to either Janesville or Jamesville, so to me, it didn't matter. It didn't make any difference. So I noticed that the starting salary was very similar to the departments I was applying for down in the Chicago area, and I figured the cost of living was probably less. I don't know how much it was an hour, but it was like $12,400 a year, something like that. So yeah, if you cut that down, it might be $5, $6, $7 an hour. I don't know. But anyway, so I applied that. They moved quite a bit more rapidly in the hiring process. But similar to you, I think 600 people took the written test, and there were 3 positions at the time. And that culled it down to, I think, about 150 people did the physical agility test. And then it got down from there to interviews, etc. And so they hired 3 people, not including myself, and then not including me. Okay. And then 2 months later, an officer resigned to go do something else, I guess, and so I got hired then. So that was May of 1978, and I was still 21 for another month. So I moved up to Janesville, and
Jamesville or Janesville?
yeah, Janesville, which I found out what it was. As a matter of fact, my car broke down when I was coming up to take the test. I had to borrow my brother's car, and it was very foggy. I got lost. I was out by the GM plant. I thought, this is just gray and dank and ugly.
Going to Detroit.
So yes, right. It was very straight. So at any rate, I got hired, and as soon as I had, unlike Eric, I had gone to a couple of years of college specifically for criminal justice, and most of the instructors were either Chicago cops or suburban cops from down there. And so I came up here, realized I knew nothing about what police work was like. I had been interested in doing it for a number of years, but I think one of the things that sort of cinched it was I had my bicycle stolen when I was like 13, and the neighbor cop 2 doors down, I told him, and he got it back like 2 days later. Yes, he pulls up with it in the trunk of his car. So I think he took it and was using it for a while.
My neighborhood.
Back. Yeah.
Nobody fucks around in my neighborhood.
Right. So I got it back, and I thought, well, that's cool.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. And so I knew him a little bit. I knew a few other people a little bit, but back then, particularly in the Chicago area, you trusted but feared the police. I mean, if they stopped you, you just said yes sir, no sir, all that kind of, that was just how it went. It's not because they were menacing or threatening you. I think it was a combination of respect, wondering what was going to happen from your family for you being involved with the police, all those kind of things. So at any rate, I came up here. There was still a little bit of that in 1978. But I was surprised the sort of response that the public, some of the public, gave the police even back then. However, when I first started, whether you wrote a traffic ticket or arrested somebody for disorderly conduct or anything like that, when you went in front of a judge, the officer's word was gold. I mean, there was no video. There were no other things to back any of this up. If the officer got up and said this is what the person did, and the person denied it, the judge took the side of the cop. He had no reason not to. He felt that was your job and you were objective, and until you proved you weren't, it was okay, which seems a lot different than today. So from 1978 until I retired in 2008.
Okay, let's just go back to what you just said.
Okay.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well,
the cop just sits down in the chair and says, "That's what I saw. That's what happened."
Well, there was a belief, and maybe it was naive, but there was a belief that the officers had integrity. And so, a judge felt that it was a professional talking to a professional. And unless there was something that was
just the scale the other way.
Yeah, they were going. You were going to get, in other words, the benefit of the doubt. Not every doubt, but you had the benefit of the doubt. You went in, and it was if you were going to dig a hole to blow your case, the shovel was in your hand to do that. And and they listened to the testimony carefully, obviously, and thought if you were embellishing or if you were telling the truth, whatever. I believe. I can't speak for the judges. So it changed quite a bit over the years.
A little bit.
Yeah. And so even in 2008, I continued doing. I had done some teaching. I had belonged to some various groups that were involved with law enforcement. I stayed with that. So I stayed in touch. I still went to some training sessions. I wound up getting a PI license and started doing that, and still do that now. So that's how it evolved for me. But I think this will come out as we talk about all these things. But yes, I had many of those same experiences where, whether you're at a, you're dealing with a sexual assault victim, whether that be a child or an adult, or whether you're talking about talking to the loved ones of a homicide victim, or whether you're talking to the suspect in a homicide. There are all these things, and I guess in terms of specific stories, the one thing for today I will say is that the first time someone confessed to me on a homicide, they had killed a child. They had thrown the child across the room. The child got a skull fracture, died. It was quite, other investigators were working on it. They thought they were going to get to talk to this gentleman one more time. They called him in. They said, hey, we want a fresh look at it. Give it a shot. So what I was surprised is when he confessed to it. And when I say confessed, what I really mean is he made admissions which made him responsible for the death. Confession in law enforcement is
let's
a
not get
rare
into, let's
thing.
not get into the weeds.
So we're not going to get into that right now. But in terms of the admissions that he made, which was made him culpable for the death, as I consoled him after he said that, I realized he had just handed the responsibility for the death off to me. He had cleared his, chalkboard, so to speak. He had erased it of the problem, and now I was holding it. It was almost like holding a hot potato. Now, later I talked to a minister. Now, I'm actually Catholic, but I was talking to a Lutheran minister, because why not? I thought he might, get this a little bit more, and we were friends. But he said there are Bible stories also relate to how if you accept or assist someone in their confession, that often you take on the weight of what their issue was. So I palpably felt it. It was quite strange, and it was another one of those things that I don't know how many storage bins you can have in your brain, but that one wasn't fitting into any of the current ones I
don't
had.
have one for
so
that.
Now I had it. Now I
don't
had
have a spot for
now we
this
had
one.
to have one more.
No.
So
this is kind of like The
that's
Exorcist. Because I have not had that experience.
Okay.
Somebody admits to doing some stupid shit. I have not ever felt at all that like now I'm complicit.
Okay.
In whatever it was. So I think that's interesting. But I feel it's like The Exorcist. Didn't the father in The Exorcist get the demon in him and then throw himself out the window?
Yeah. The father by the priest, you mean? Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. I didn't know if you meant the father or the child or the.
We can go upstairs if you want to throw yourself out a window.
Yeah, right.
We can take care of this.
Right. And then exorcise the demons.
Exercise the demons.
So there are, and that sort of brings us full circle, I think. Not full, but anyway, it goes to the direction of where we intend on going with our interviews.
Yeah, right. Yes. So I'm going to have a question for you. I'm going to grab a beer, and the question is going to be.
Grab me one too. Please.
What?
Grab me one too.
Yeah. When I get back into earshot.
That's interesting.
I'll be able to edit this.
The one beer that was right in the front was the coldest one because it was here from last time.
This one is super cold.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, the question I was going to ask you, we talked already about the fact that when you applied, you was 600.
I think there was 6-something applicants. It was crazy.
There was at least 300 when and by the way, I did get a college degree. We sort of made it sound like I never went to college.
It's your story, man. You can say whatever you want.
I mean, can we say Yale?
We can.
We can.
But I don't know why you'd want to associate yourself with those people. But anyway.
That's rude. I went to Black Hawk Tech, which is Yale Midwest. The last few application processes at Janesville before I left, and I know other people, and I know you know other people in the field. Applications are plummeting. They're plummeting to 20 people apply for a job, maybe not even that many. And then when they do the test, some of those guys don't even show up. Is that coming back? Are we going to? What's the trend? What do you think? I know you don't know shit about this. I know you're just off the cuff. I'm the same way. I have not researched this at all. I just know that this is the case. Is it coming back, or is it going further away?
Okay. Well, first of all, since I don't think we ever talked about this, the police department we're talking about, Janesville Police Department, is approximately 100 sworn officers, and then a number of support people throughout the agency. So at any given time, the turnover used to be 1, 2, 3 people maybe a year. Excuse me. Now the turnover, I think, is more significant than that, and some years quite a bit more significant than that. So you've got that pushed up against a small amount of applicants. My non-expert opinion on where we're at and why we're there is because, as we just explained, at some early time you get motivated or think that law enforcement might be for you. And my feeling is that part of that is because over the years you've had at least a few, if not several stories, and in my case even an experience or two, wherein law enforcement seemed to do something for you and you saw that other people around you respected what they did even if they didn't do it. And honestly, that's a big draw for pulling people into that crowd, because it's not about the money, it's not about the hours. It sometimes can be about the excitement, but when you get into it, there are long times of very tedious, prolonged, nothing going on work. In Wisconsin, in February, if you're on night shift, it might be 20. Nobody's even on the street. You're just trying to stay awake for an 8-hour shift. So once you start to lose the draw that this is something good for the community, that the people of the community are behind you, that diminishes, I think, the draw of people who are interested. And then you put on top of that as you not only see people start to not have the same amount of respect, they actively disagree with what law enforcement is doing, and you see support growing for that portion of it. And then when you listen to any kind of media, whether it be news or social media, when what's highlighted more is what law enforcement does wrong than what they do right, all those things keep thinning out the crowd. And then law enforcement is normally now talked about as a social change agent. In other words, we're going to get more psychologists, sociologists in there to correct human behavior. Wherein before, what it was about is, here's the community. There are other entities that really are involved in that. And law enforcement's initial line is just to keep the order and also keep people safe. And so now it's evolving into something else, and the draw isn't there. To be positive, I do think these things ebb and flow. So I think eventually there will be.
So this is one thing that I have not seen an ebb and flow on. When now, granted, I wasn't around in the '60s when I think police was really undergoing a significant alteration, and was it the Democrat convention in Chicago where there was like,
68 Democrat,
the riots and
yes.
brutality. And then the '70s, what I remember from the '70s is like One Adam 12 and Dragnet, and you got to go way back into the TV, the pop culture to find like what we thought police were, what we thought, police were back then. But I mean, today, you have blue bloods, right? And you got, I'm talking about TV shows, which I don't watch any TV. I've never watched Blue
I've never
Bloods,
seen
but
that show. I've heard
I
of it.
know, just the caricatures of what police, Officer Bar Brady from South Park. I know big dopey guy, right? Does dopey shit, says dopey things. So you have these caricatures, and I mean, we all know cops who fit into those caricatures.
Yep.
They're obviously modeled off actual people, but they are just caricatures. I think the problem currently is that, and you mentioned this, that there is not a sense of that's an honorable, respect-worthy thing to do. That's gone. That was what existed for me through the 70s and 80s when I was growing up, and through the 90s. Right. After I became a cop, I still felt as though there was a significant amount of, much to, in spite of the fact that there were a number of high-profile cops doing stupid shit, Rodney King, and then the Mark Furman of the O.J. Simpson thing, and you can list them off, and time again, which didn't slowly chip away or erode at the integrity. Like they chopped it off in just like big chunks, and then as that just continues to get chopped away, why would you add in today the layer of transparency, which is that there literally is no place. If you're a cop today, you can't make a mistake. You can't. I mean, if you do, you're just hoping for days and days and days that somehow doesn't show up on YouTube somewhere, or like, and everybody makes mistakes, for fuck's sake. Everybody does. But there is an expected, just an expectancy of competence when it comes to cops. That like, you're going to know exactly what you're doing all the time. And honestly, most cops, I'm telling you, they don't really know what they're doing.
Well,
they don't really, because every situation is completely dynamic and fluid, and you've got training, and you have seen something similar before, but you're flying blind in most situations. You are taking a God's honest best guess at, because it's not like tomorrow we're going to assign you tomorrow to a child abuse involving a deaf child. At least then you've got like, all right, what am I going to need to no, you get called and 5 minutes later you're there, and then you have to like figure out,
yes,
all right, how am I going to do this? And it's awkward and clumsy, and a lot of times looking back, even you're like, I could have done that better. Now, if that is somehow memorialized in a video, and I'm like, look at this guy doing this dumb shit. Like, who wants that job? Who wants that job?
right.
Where like you can just be going along doing your God's honest best to do a good job, and so yeah, I suppose it's probably very difficult to try to lure someone into.
Well, lure is an interesting word because, hopefully we're not just trying to say, oh, yeah, really, really, you want this.
Cajole?
Yes, just sneak them in there. But that's a good point, because the other thing that occurs to me as you said that is today, because of the way media comes out and the use of computers and cell phones, people have become used to getting their news in 20, 30-second snippets.
Yeah.
And those snippets are sold and promoted by how fun, exciting, different, horrible they are. And so if you happen to be part of one of those snippets, yeah, and so you could go out there thinking that failure is likely and notoriety of that failure is also likely. So why would I do this? It's like somebody on Christmas morning, you open up a package and you've got ice skates, and you've never ice skated before, and afternoon we're going to come out and videotape you ice skating.
You're going to be on CNN later.
Yeah,
ice skating.
Right. And so this is going to be really funny for a lot of people. And by the way, you might want to check whether or not the pond is frozen, because you might wind up swimming during this thing. So that's what it comes like, and that's what it is. And in fact, so much, when we were doing instruction earlier this year at our old police department, one of the things that excuse me, I realized in looking back and pulling material together was that no matter what you say in the classroom, most of the instruction was done by the other officers on your shift, because you were looking around. How would they handle it?
What are they doing?
They would tell you later in the locker room what you didn't do right, or you'd show up on a call with someone who had more experience, and even though it was your call, you would handle it, and you knew you were going to do the report, but you were all ears to say, "Ooh, I've never seen this before. Is there a better way of doing this?"
Yeah.
Of course, at the same time, there were certain officers that would show up that you knew were just going to make your life harder. But I mean, that's part of the whole thing.
That's any job anywhere.
And that's exactly right. I mean, if you have 100 people who come from different backgrounds, who are trained over a number of years, who are different age groups, who grew up in different circumstances, they're going to look at situations differently, and they're going to apply their personal knowledge there, which you don't have. So it's going to look different. So all that, back to your question, will it bounce back? It may. I mean, will it look different? It probably will.
I think police work is going to get profoundly more expensive for the taxpayer, because there's going to continue to be a push for more training, which you can't. It's very difficult to argue against that. How do you argue against, like, we don't need more training? I'm certainly not going to do that. However, how do you train for a position that requires a dynamic application of skills that run a spectrum from traffic through criminal law, through domestic abuse law, through sexual assault investigation, through use of force, through firearms, through you can go on for a long time to coming up with mental health, autism. How do you get somebody well-rounded? I heard, and I love Sam Harris. I love listening to Sam Harris, but Sam Harris had an idea. He's like, I think that police officers need to be so well-trained in jiu-jitsu that they are borderline experts in jiu-jitsu, so that they could use hand-to-hand combat instead of deadly force. Which I appreciate the idea. It's incredibly naive to think that, if somebody's got a knife, I'm just going to go jiu-jitsu on you. Which, I think if you're a jiu-jitsu expert, you're probably not going to have very much difficulty disarming someone who's, I don't know. I don't know anything about jiu-jitsu, but the amount of training that is required to learn that jiu-jitsu to that level of expertise.
Sure.
Doesn't leave you a lot of time, A, to do your job, and B, to know all of the other.
And it's not just the training to get to that level. In order to maintain that level, you have to spend numerous hours a week to get to them. But
Have you seen the cops we were around?
right. But the other issue is this, and not to get into it deep here today, but police policies are hugely driven by attorneys who are saying you can't have 5% or 7% of your workforce on disability because your budget will be gone when you're paying those people that period of time. So it's gotten away more and more from hand-to-hand combat, which is what is being described here, because as you know, even on a movie set where you orchestrate what's going to happen, it doesn't mean somebody after they takes a swing, their elbow doesn't accidentally get in contact and bust somebody's nose. So the great part about police work at the end of the shift is that it was so dynamic, so unique, that you're fired up for the next shift. But while you're standing in a living room on Christmas Eve with all the packages broken, the Christmas tree over on the side, and people screaming at each other, and you're trying to figure out, I got about 14 minutes to make this right, then it just seems impossible. When you get through the end of the shift, it seems like, wow.
So going back to what you sort of skimmed over. So what you're saying is that there are lawyers working behind the scenes who are pushing for policies that use tools like tasers, pepper spray, firearms, whatever, instead of using the force continuum, using hand-to-hand combat, and trying to gain compliance.
But I'm not saying behind the scenes. It's not behind the scenes at all. I think that they talk to a lot of jurisdictions are self-insured. Other ones are a combination of self-insured and having other insurance. I think they are basically just pointing out the obvious that if you put your officers in a position to wrestle around with people hand to hand, they're more likely to get hurt, and you can only handle so much of that before your budget and your whole system slows down.
I don't know that that's true. I could imagine that the same lawyer says, if you can wrestle this guy to the ground and get him in handcuffs without tasing him and he tips over and hits his head on the fucking curb, or you pepper spray him and he turns around and runs into a tree and knocks himself out. Like, there's lawsuits just waiting. It's a minefield of lawsuits. Sure. So I don't know that. I don't know if disability, the liability there outweighs, like, I don't know.
Yeah, but see, and I don't want to get, but there is case law which is studied to be able to say this maneuver is still more defensible, and we have Smith versus Colorado behind us already. So you start to shape how you're going to do things out on the street to be the most defensible, because you assume, just like you said, you're going to get sued. You're going to get sued no matter which way you go. Which do you have the best chance of winning? And so that process, I believe, is also part of it. Now, that I'm not saying that an attorney comes in and calls a chief of police over and says, "Hey, you have that." But there is the chief of police answers to a whole spectrum of people who are in the direct politics or quasi-politics or support of the political entity that they represent. Excuse me. And some of those policies are made that way. They're not always made by. In other words, for instance, chokeholds. It's been decided that sleeper type chokeholds are just not going to be used.
As long as I've been a cop, the only training I've got on chokeholds is we don't train them, you don't do them. That's the training I got on.
Yeah, but obviously other jurisdictions hadn't caught up to that.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
But here's the thing. You can have someone that you're wrestling with on the ground, you've got them face down, they've got a weapon. They're going to have to flip over in order to use that weapon effectively, because, we're doing this fight. You could you could render them unconscious with a chokehold, and I don't know the percentage, but I would say it's in the 90s that they're not going to have damage. The problem is that when you put that on and somebody dies, that's almost a dead bag when we're in a lawsuit. So they say we're just not going to do
that. Not if they have a deadly weapon.
Recently not anymore. It will not be used. It's just like
it's
right.
Correct. Yes, you just. I was never trained in how to do it. I've never done one. I've never seen one done. I don't know anything about them because it's just like that. And so many states are like, we have finally banned the chokehold. Like, oh well, thank God.
Yeah.
I'm not even a cop anymore. I was never trained on it. I don't know anything about it. But it sounds as though there must have been a point when it was used so flagrantly and haphazardly that it killed enough people that across the nation, basically. I mean, I don't know how many places were using them or were training them, but it must have been just like, all right, we're just not doing this anymore.
Well, I wish that the changes came because of that kind of logistic, pure look at the numbers and make a decision on it. Because, as I said, in 78 when I started, that meant I was working with people who were towards the end of their career who started
in the 50s.
Yeah, and one or two in the 40s. Because, you're talking a 30-year career, so
you're
78.
fucking old.
Yeah. So I might work with somebody who started in 48. Okay. So now, like anything, just like when you see those changes in various styles of shooting a handgun on the if you're in your career long enough, you see what you were taught on become obsolete, become a third iteration, and then all of a sudden you feel like you're right back to where you were back then. Yeah. And it's like, the bullet still comes out. Yeah,
are we just
what's going on? In other words, so I'm not sure. I wish I could say that. I'm not sure. So the other thing I'm saying is that I did see people do it. It was ungodly effective. Suddenly there's just someone out for the count, put them in the cell, lock them up. They come to
no harm, no foul.
They come to later, probably have a headache, and they say, "Wow, I guess I screwed up, didn't I?" Because they were, and I don't know how.
I don't think they're
often
coming
it
back.
happens anymore.
You're making a case for them.
No,
I'm
not. But what I'm saying is that at that point, there used to be a very common response of, "Hey, I'm sorry. I was drunk. I was mad. I did this. I did that," and I almost feel like more of what happens towards the end of my career was no conversation, and then maybe not. There was going to be a complaint and or a lawsuit, but in the early part of my career, it was much more like, "Man, I deserved it. Thanks," and da 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 da, and out the door, and you'd be like, "Wow, that was yeah." So all of that changed, and that's cultural differences. Yeah. So of course, police work had to change to, adjust to that. And
well, we gotta get some young guys down here to tell us how it's fucking happening now, because if they're willing.
Right. Yes. If they're willing to come in here without wearing ballistic helmet, vest, and several different kinds of
this is a safe
protection.
Zone. This is the safe zone.
Yeah.
We use all nice words and language like they like. All right.